gets better. So
It does.
Two Storms, episode 6. The siblings reunite at Nell's funeral. A lot of, so I'll just read through this and then we'll talk about it.
Okay.
A lot of confrontation and anger as Hugh comes face to face, the dad, with his children. This episode switches back and forth between the funeral and to Hill House on the night of a big storm. We see a lot of scary movie tricks during the storm, a lot of flashlight scenes in the dark, leading us to wait for jump scares, but no real action happening. This episode, and then he gets to an opinion.
We see a little
insight into what Hugh remembers and experienced in the house and with Olivia. And at the end, we see Nell as a ghost at her own viewing, watching her family fight and bicker.
Okay, so this episode is about emotions.
Oh, man, it's great.
It's not a fast-paced episode, and I think what's beautiful about this episode...
Even though it's not fast-paced, it has great pacing.
Well, you get to see the person, eldest Steve, starts to come apart. You think it would be Luke going to see... I mean, basically, it's an open casket viewing of Nell's body.
The day before the funeral, yeah.
And what you find out later, both in the storm in the past and the storm in the present, nowhere else is affected but where the family is.
Yeah.
In the past, they're affected in the house and they lose power. And Nell goes missing. They can't find her. Mm-hmm. And at the funeral, they're all there because of Nell. And you get to see, one of my favorite shots is the dad walks in. He hasn't seen them since Nell's wedding 3 or 4 years ago. Yeah. And he walks in and it's like one continuous shot, which I said in my...
Do you want to go into your question?
Okay, so what I said in my question is Two Storms is both my favorite episode in the series and one of the saddest.
Oh God,
For the first time in years, all the living family members are together, as well as the dead ones, as well as the deceased family members. The camera work in this episode is amazing, as well as the acting. And there's this one shot that is the dad coming in, and you see all of the 4 kids that are alive, and Nell's in the background in the casket. And they all look at it, and they're like, wow, Cheryl, you did a great job on her body. So before the dad gets there, the husband, Shirley's husband, is like, does anybody want something to drink or eat? He's like the sweet Hispanic guy trying to feed everybody, just very nurturing and loving. And you think that Luke's going to be a mess. And he's like, come on, Luke. Steve's like, let's go up there. And Luke's looking at her and he's like, wow, you did a great job. And Steve's like, oh, yeah, boy. Steve starts to come apart. Yeah, he starts to come apart. And he's like, and what Steve is actually seeing is as he walks away, he goes, I need a drink. He walks over to Kevin and gets a drink. And as he looks back at her casket, the dead mom's there, and every time he turns around, the mom walks closer.
And he's still in denial, and he can't. Yeah, he's like, and it's so great because like he's the one that's seen all this.
He would be okay, and Luke'd be the one they're all worried about. Yeah. Luke's actually really calm because he hasn't used. Yeah. He faced his fear.
Yeah, he faced his fear.
Yeah, and so Theo's there. She's mad. She's drunk. And so like Shirley is trying to be like copacetic, and when the dad walks in, you see all of the adult children with her casket in the background. And the camera pans around the back of the dad. And when it pans around again, all of the actors who played them as young kids are in the exact same position going, it's good to see you, Dad. Glad you're back.
Doesn't like the young actress who plays Theo.
And the one young actress, when the dad finally goes to Nell's casket, it's not adult Nell, it's baby Nell.
Baby Nell. Yeah.
It's the child. And it's just like kind of this beautiful way of showing, not telling. Parents will always see you as their kids. You're always going to be your baby.
It's so beautiful, extremely well handled. And
so impactful.
The whole episode is only done in like probably 4 to 6 shots. It's all mostly
it's basically all of this stuff that they've pushed down for years comes to the surface. Comes up. Yeah. But there's also honesty, there's also truth, and there's healing later. Yeah. Not in this episode.
Not in this one.
But there is truth.
But it's such a great payoff.
I was just curious what you thought about.
Well, in the first 5 episodes, it's such a huge build
perspective.
Up.
It's all point of view.
It's all POV. It's all also build up. Like it's it's laying down the foundation. It's getting us to connect with these characters, and it's getting us invested. Yeah. And with 5, you finally get Nell's perspective. Finally fills in all the missing pieces,
all the little things,
mostly. And then there's still more that are left over. And with 6, it's the beginning of seeing where this is all going. Yeah. And Mike Flanagan does such a great job.
This is a masterful episode. That's all I'm going to say.
I can't imagine the amount of prep, the amount of days and weeks they had to film this.
The whole thing is 3 shots? 4 shots?
I would say probably 5.
And it's a 45, 50-minute episode.
And each one's about 15, 20 minutes. I counted, I would say about 5 or 6. And it's just beautiful. Oh my gosh.
No, this is a beautiful episode. It's sad. But it's also so beautiful that this family's love has held them together through the worst.
And it's literal ghosts coming back to haunt them and bring them together. And the storm that's in the background is so crazy because it's such a beautiful parallel because not just the parallels of the two storms in the past and in the present, but the storm of the family struggling and having to interact again, and the strife that comes from that, and the storm outside.
None of this has been done in truth. They don't know why the dad didn't tell them. The big issue is the dad has not told them while the mom died what happened that night. Yeah. And so what ends up happening is you start to see all these rifts that have been cracks in the relationship just come to the surface. Like they share stories about when Nell is little and how much Aunt Janet got annoyed at her mispronouncing stuff. And that Nell, and the dad even tells a story that he said, you know, when she would write to Santa, she would never ask her anything for herself. She'd only ask for what Steve and Luke and Shirley and Theo wanted. And he goes, your mom and I knew if we didn't do it, we would be in big trouble. But she'd never ask for anything for herself, which is another insight into her character. And basically the two questions I have are, this is both my favorite episode, also the camera work is amazing. How does both the storm in the past and the storm in the present interact? Because basically what happens is as this storm is going on, the power goes out and Shirley's like, I have a backup generator. I don't know why it's not working. So the dad says, well, I'm going to go check something else with a flashlight. And when he goes down this hallway, all of a sudden we're in the house and it's one long shot. They didn't cut. They didn't do anything. So they had to set that up.
So they had the sets connected and then they went into it. It's so cool.
It's amazing if you like camera work. It's so amazing. And so basically the storms that are going on, there's a night where the power went out back in the past. And it shows how as a family, the mom and dad were so loving. The siblings were so supportive. They all get together and like, Steve's like, you don't got to be afraid, Luke and Nell. It's okay. Shirley's like, and the mom's like, why don't we make some hot chocolate? And the parents go upstairs and the mom's kind of out of it.
Yeah.
And she's like, am I dreaming? And the dad's like, babe, where have you been? And we're going to see things from the mom's point of view that basically this house is playing tricks on her. It's kind of consuming all of them. But basically, how do the two stories of the same family bleed into one another and repeat the cycle of the kids wandering around in the dark? Because the lights go out, Theo or Shirley is holding Nell's hands, and all of a sudden they turn over and the girl's hand is still out, but Nell's gone. And Luke's like, I don't know where she is.
Yeah.
And they're looking for her. And during this thing where they're all there, they start to fight. And Shirley's like, I'm going to go check something. And when she goes over to Nell's body, there are buttons on her eyes. Yeah. And the mom used to call her buttons. And Shirley's like, is this a joke? Yeah. Because her kids aren't even there. They're like, who would do this? And so basically they're going to take the buttons off of her eyes and they start fighting more and more until finally
and the storm gets louder.
Steve's
louder,
losing
louder.
it, and Steve starts taking things out on the dad. He goes, why
and
don't you
Cheryl, I think, hops in on that too.
Well, they try to get into it, and Steve's like, you know what? I just want to know the truth. What mom was mentally ill. Why didn't you ever just say she was mentally? And it's all this blame.
Yep.
It's not done in a constructive way. It's not done honestly. Theo's really drunk. At one point, she falls off the couch. They go to help her. She's like, don't touch me. And I think later, Steve says, Theo's just basically a clenched fist waiting to punch something.
And the husband's like trying to support all of them throughout this.
Food. Do you want
I got food. Do you want food?
Yeah.
And it's like, and there's like a break from this fighting at one point before they get into the final
the buttons on the eye.
With the buttons on before they get in the final confrontation. And then like he's like, okay, let's take a break.
He's trying to mediate between everybody. This is not even his
Poor
family.
guy, like he is so good-hearted,
supportive.
Like, Cheryl found a gem. Like
no, and isn't it interesting? Both, I think the two
and Luke is so level-headed through the whole episode, more than any of them, and calm.
He is the most calm one, and he's taking it in stride. But I think it's because Luke, in that episode, a twin thing, has healed more than any of them have.
Oh, yeah.
Like Shirley looks like she has her life together, but basically she hasn't healed. She's still that girl standing at the casket.
Well, she also is repeating the same behavior that the mother had, where
she's seen things.
She has it made. She has her life together, but she doesn't have herself together.
Well, and I think it's so interesting. Steve got married to a very good woman. We don't know why they broke up yet or are separated. Shirley has a very loving, supportive husband. The kids are a huge part of her life. They are good parents. They love one another. And even Nell, before her husband died, found a very loving, healthy, supportive man. The parents did a good job because they modeled well.
They modeled well.
All three of those children made great choices, the ones that got married. And I feel like even Luke was attracted to someone with really good quality. I even wrote one of my questions I cut out. He's a good man with a good heart.
Yeah.
He just had this trauma happen. And that's what led him to addiction.
And it's sad because you see him finally turn around in that in the twin thing. Yeah. Well, you finally see him turning around and all the bad stuff starts happening to him as he's facing his fear finally.
And the ghost comes at his lowest point. At his lowest Isn't that how the demonic works? Yep. It always attacks you at your lowest point. For Nell, it's giving her all these things that you wanted and at your lowest point.
Yeah.
And the mom too, we're going to see that. And I actually put something in there.
And it's cool how the house does that later on in the next episode for the dad, but he resists it.
But the dad is probably the most functioning guy. Yeah. And we find out in the mother and father's relationship that he would always say, your mom said I was the kite and I was the thing that grounded her from going into the air. And how they had this loving, supportive relationship. But my last question for this episode is, at the heart of episode 6 is the theme of truth and being honest, because we do get that there is this huge moment, and we flash back to the past where they can't find Nell, and basically you see Nell, the bent neck lady, as the bent neck lady throughout this episode. She's standing there watching. Yeah, she's
standing there watching everybody.
They can't see her, but we, the audience,
also in this episode, the reason why there's so much wonderful setup with the Wonders is because you see a lot of behind the scenes subtle ghosts in the background, especially
they
in this
always do the thing as you're walking through,
and you'll see throughout the series. But in this one, they really stood out to me. It was the very first time it stood out to me where I was like, oh wow, you can see there's people in the background as ghosts.
Because during the storm, there's lightning, so the ghosts are illuminated.
Yeah, they're illuminated.
And there's even a little boy in a wheelchair that's ghostly going from a room and stuff.
And the house is messing with the parents as they're upstairs.
But it's getting to Liv. It's getting to Olivia, the mother.
Yeah, it's getting to
Olivia.
And
what ends up happening at the funeral, after we flash back to the past and come back, is Steve just starts losing it. And we have a thing where I think it's first we have the revelation about, the book.
Yeah, I don't remember
because
much from
earlier
this.
in the episode with, I believe it was 4 or 5 episode, maybe it was Theo. It was after Theo's episode, I think, or maybe it was Theo's episode, where basically Theo sees Kevin, Shirley's husband, because she lives in the guest house, and she's like, Shirley found your checkbook, and he goes, oh no, and she goes, you better make up that you're having an affair or something. She's
and we're like, wait,
and as an audience, you're like,
I thought
what
that's
could
what
be
it's
worse
about.
than having an affair and him cheating on her? And what you find out at the thing, she starts telling Steve,
we never took your blood money.
We're
shame upon this family. You took advantage of us.
Theo comes out and says, I took it. That's how I paid for my PhD.
Yep.
And she basically tells Theo to her face because she's so angry, she's so hurt. First she tells her, you can get out of my house.
Yeah, get out. And so because she's living on her property.
Next, Steve goes, you better be careful who you accuse, Shirley. Oh. And what's the reveal, Jake?
Well, and then did he reveal or does Keith reveal?
It's Kevin.
Kevin. So Kevin then finally reveals, along with Theo,
he goes,
that, we actually took his money.
And she goes, what?
And he's like, that's why there's a separate checking book.
And basically she's been doing a lot of stuff at the funeral home pro bono. They're in the red almost every month.
Yeah.
Because she sees the heart of the people. She wants to put discounts.
And that's what
so this is how he's paid for the business. Is not telling her that he took Steve's royalties every month.
And he keeps telling her and having conversations. He's a good husband. He's like, honey, we can't just give stuff away anymore. We have 2 kids to support. We have to support the family and the business, and we should be nice to make a profit.
Because there's stability in that.
Because they had a discussion in, I think, episode 2 where he says, look, she's like, well, are we in the black? He's like, look, last month we were barely in the black. Like, that means
you need
they're
to
making
stop
money.
Giving stuff away.
It's like, you need to stop giving stuff away.
But her heart is to help people in that grief.
Which is great.
They all have great hearts.
Yeah.
Like even Luke is like, he has such a good heart.
But the husband, you find out, the husband went behind her back and kept the money from Steve.
Which I kind of feel, at least from my perspective, is almost worse than an affair.
It's pretty big. Issue. It's a huge trust issue.
But it's like, so she is mad at him. She's mad at Theo. And that's when they go back and they find the buttons on her eyes.
Yep. And then
it's almost like Nell is trying to get their attention. And you see the bent neck lady, Nell as the bent neck lady. Yeah. And when you see the bent neck lady this time, she is so decomposed.
And doesn't Luke see her or see something?
Steve sees the mom.
Steve sees the mom.
In the next episode, Luke sees the mom.
And then at the very beginning, I forgot about this. What? But Cheryl sees the guy with the coffee cup again, or the teacup.
Oh yeah, it's
At the very
a
beginning,
whiskey glass.
The whiskey glass.
And
she sees him again,
seeing him
sitting down as the camera's like panning, turning
and then when she
around.
turns away and she looks back,
there's
she's
so
gone.
many elements where actors are hiding and coming back into frame.
And so you're kind of like, what's the story with this? So the denouement of this episode happens in the present, where Steve is just losing it. He starts yelling at the dad about not getting the mom who is mentally ill checked, and it's all mental illness, and we all have it in our genes.
Blame. It's all
blame. It's not done in a constructive way. And then all of a sudden he says, the dad's like, well, what are you trying to say? And Steve screams at the top of his lungs that the wrong parent died.
And then
the split second later, what happens?
The casket supports break and
Nell's
body, and she falls out of the casket.
Exactly.
It's like, my God.
It is this moment where I think the person is like, you're all here. Why are you? I'm trying to communicate. Stop fighting with each other.
Yeah.
And they all stop what they're doing, even though they've had these revelations. They've had all this hurt that's bubbling to the surface, and they all go to help lift the casket.
Yep, all of them.
And put her body back. And Cheryl's like, I'm going to go get my makeup bag. Yep. And we have another flashback. And when the lights go out again, and when Cheryl is trying to find, I think the husband, Theo, and somebody else are like, I'm going to go try and find a flashlight. And Theo's like, I'm going to find more booze. And when they get down to the basement, the lights go out. Cheryl's trying to find the place where she has her bag. And when she opens the door,
to one of the
Theo
rooms,
and the husband look like they're talking to each other very intimately.
Very intimately, yeah.
And they both step away, and Cheryl just slams the door.
And of course, Theo is drunk, and she like falls forward a little bit. So he looks
like he's trying to stop her from falling.
Bad.
It does look bad. But Cheryl's also pissed at both of them.
Yeah. And now it's like there's even more.
Didn't tell her about
and so it's like,
and Theo didn't tell her about taking the money.
It's a bunch of errors, and it's just
miscommunication
and strife, and then the tension, and then
the way the episode ends.
I don't remember.
Ends with Nell in the past, them finding her, and they're saying, Nell, where were you? And she goes, where were you? I was here. I was yelling and screaming your name, and no one heard me. And then we flash forward to the lights coming back on, and they're like, well, let's all get a good night's sleep. And we go back to the casket, and the bent neck lady, decomposed, is standing there with her neck even more off, standing by Nell's body. And you hear Nell as a child say, I yelled and yelled, and no one could hear me. And that's how the episode ends.
Yep.
And it's just it's such a sad episode, but so beautiful. So my other question was, the family members have been living in a form of denial, refusing to deal with their feelings of anger and grief. The family members must face each other and the truth and tragedy surrounding their lives. Truth can be painful, but it is also an important part of the grieving process. How does the truth of each and every family member slowly come to life?
Yeah, because
I think living in denial and deception and living without the truth, killing them as a family.
I think in each family, there's always unsaid things that need to be not necessarily brought up, but at the right time, whether that be a year down the line or 10 years down the line or 50 years down the line, depending on what's going on.
Yeah.
But I feel like something that's unresolved, something that's unaddressed.
There's a time and a season.
There's a time and a season, but it also...
Truth is better than lying.
Yeah,
in some cases.
And also sometimes it's better to do something preemptively before it gets even bad. I mean, we've had discussions about like wills and stuff like that, and families we know in our family, and it's like a discussion needs to have, and you have to address every single thing of what the specific, what's in the will, because you don't want people.
Honest.
You want people to know what's in the will before the person dies.
Yeah.
Because otherwise, there's going to be hurt, there's going to be strife, there's going to be anger.
Well, and part of that grieving is you have to be honest with yourself.
Yeah.
And I think that's, a lot of the characters
that's going to be a big self check. I think for
honest with themselves.
Yeah, and it's just so sad in this episode seeing the family just being torn apart and the storm of their conversation. And it's like,
and biblically, are you supposed to hold on to in the storm? You're supposed to hold on to Christ.
Yeah.
You're supposed to have a firm foundation on the rock.
Yeah.
And we're looking at someone that's from a family from a secular point of view, and we're looking at people that don't have that. Yeah. And yet that love of a family, the way God knits together families, is so powerful that they've lived with all this distance, yet that love is still there even when they're mad at each other.
You know what I mean? Family is like the stronghold.
Yes.
Right. And it's crazy and it's awesome to see this like from this perspective.
The way Mike Flanagan does it.
The way Mike Flanagan does it, because it's like, this is so accurate. Is he Catholic?
Yes.
Is he Christian? I don't know.
What are you trying to get across?
He's probably just well-versed in everything is my theory.
Yeah.
And he's just really like, he knows the perspective of Christianity and that kind of thing and what it looks like that way. And probably what Shirley Jackson was inspired by.
Well, and
too.
I think, I feel like whether you choose to see it through a haunted house or whether you choose to see it through the scripture, there is a spiritual world.
Oh, yeah.
You can't get away from that. I think the popular culture and the media hypes up the whole, the dark side of things because that's what sells tickets.
It hypes up the stories we tell.
It hypes up the story. But
really does.
What's interesting for me, especially in the genre of horror, if that points back to God, with spiritual truths, and this obviously does with that, how crucial the family is, how important the family is, how important the love and support of a family is, and that even without God in the equation, that's a principle that God set down, and it lasts.
And I think I like the phrase you use is horror is a snapshot of hell.
Because hell is a place without God. And if you're a Christian, it's basically separation from God.
And if there's a snapshot of hell, that means that God exists. If there's a hell, there's a heaven.
If there's a hell, there's a heaven. Isn't that why, like, what Marvel didn't want Mephisto and Satan in the books? Because it wouldn't sell in China, because China's atheistic. So if there's a Satan, there has to be a God.
Yeah, it's
Isn't
really
that bizarre?
It's really
just,
bizarre.
Like, so strange. And I kind of feel with horror, it is the same dynamic,
Yeah, it's like the stuff with zombies and stuff like that. Like a lot of satanic stuff won't be allowed there, and a lot of big companies will be scared away from that, which is sad because Mephisto's in the comics and he's a villain.
They mentioned him in Agatha. Agatha all along. They did mention Mephisto's name. So it is interesting, but they didn't show anything.
Yeah.
All right.
But anyway, so let's